Well, you know, that's the ultimate threat, a nuclear weapon going off in London or New York. And the U.S. and British and other policies are supporting that. That comes out of WikiLeaks. So there's important things coming out. The idea that this is orchestrated by the CIA is so outlandish that you can't even talk about it. There are good questions about whether a no-fly zone should be imposed. But should it be imposed by the government that 90% of Egyptians think is the major threat to their interest, and similar figures throughout the Arab world? When you move over to northwest Africa, Tunisia, Morocco, it's France that's regarded as the major enemy. Actually, this series of uprisings did not begin in Tunisia. It began in Western Sahara. In November, there was a nonviolent protest in the Western Sahara, a big tent city put up. The Moroccan troops came in and smashed it all up. Incidentally, exactly what Saudi forces did today in Bahrain. It was a tent city which they moved in and smashed, if you like, symmetry. There was enough protest about that, so there was an effort to bring it to the Security Council. It was blocked by France. France is going to carry out, impose a no-fly zone. And I don't have to go through the record, but there's a pretty heavy burden to meet before Western powers lift their finger. Suppose we agree that there should be a no-fly zone. Well, does the West have to impose it? How about the Arab League? The Arab League claims that they want a no-fly zone. They easily have the military capacity to impose it. I mean, the dictators in the Arab world, Arab League, I mean, they're collapsing under the weight of high-tech foreign aircraft, tanks, everything else that the West has been lavishing on them to recycle petrodollars. And so they got all of this. Or take, say, Turkey, which is the most respected country in the region by far. You look at the polls. It's a NATO power, a major military force. I mean, are they talking about military intervention? They can certainly carry it out. I should say that the Arab press has been condemning the Arab dictatorships for not doing anything. So maybe there ought to be intervention. But should it come from the most hated countries in the region with a long history of destruction, violence, and repression? Or should it be internal? Well, those are considerations that should be raised. Maybe one decides after raising all of these considerations that nevertheless the West should intervene to support the rebellion. Remember that the intervention is not motivated by humanitarian concerns, but because they could be ended by just ending the rebellion, which nobody's calling for. The issue is, as the question put it, should we support the rebellion? Well, okay, suppose you decide you should, despite all of these considerations. Okay, then maybe it would make sense. But unless all of these considerations are brought into account and one thinks them through, the questions just don't even arise. In fact, take, say, Sarkozy, who's been in the front of calling for some military action. Why is he wasting his time at the Security Council, where nothing's going to happen? We know that in advance. Why isn't he pressuring the Arab states to do something this minute? You know, why isn't he pressuring Turkey to carry out a no-fly zone? The Security Council won't block it. Well, I presume he's not doing that because he doesn't want any action. He wants to talk. You know. The best move for Greece might be just to default. Say, okay, we're not going to pay the debt. What would happen then? Well, actually, that's been done before. There's a model. It happened with Argentina. Argentina in the year 2000, it had been the poster child for the IMF, best doing just marvelously. And it crashed. It collapsed. The standard procedures were applied. IMF, World Bank imposed structural adjustment, meaning transfer the costs to the poor and the working people, and then taxpayer pays it off. They refused. They defaulted. They didn't pay the debt. They were too big to fail also. Foreign investors couldn't do anything about it. They defaulted, they broke all the rules, they rejected IMF advice, advice means order, and they had a huge period of economic growth, the biggest economic growth in the hemisphere through the last 10 years. Well, I don't say that would happen with Greece, but it's a path that could be considered. In fact, Europe altogether is following economic policies which are really self-destructive. In fact, there's a name for them in at least U.S. economic theory. It's called Hooverism. Europe is following the policies that Herbert Hoover followed in 1929, namely, in the midst of a depression, impose austerity, which of course is, we know what had happened. It made a huge depression worse. The problem of the economy is insufficient demand. Now, corporations have money coming out of their ears. The banks are richer than ever. They don't invest. They don't want to lend. There's very limited demand. It's not coming from consumers. It's not coming from corporations. There's only one source. It's got to come from the government. There has to be a stimulation of the economy which will create demand and use unused capacity which is going to waste and grow the economies out of a deficit. I mean, each country has its own problems. They're all different. But there's a general line of advice. There has been a big change in in recent years in global power. It's not really a change among states. It's a class change. In recent years, working people all over the world have seen their share of national income decline. That's true almost everywhere. It's true in the West. It's true in China. China has some of the worst inequality in the world, and it's been growing. There's plenty of labor protest in China, tens of thousands of labor actions every year in protest. And they're now, you have them in Wisconsin, you have them in Egypt, and so on. Now, that's part of a major change of the post-1970s economy, reducing the share of national income and all other rights in the hands of working people, peasants, workers, and so on, and increasing concentration of wealth in a very small part of the population. That's a major change, and it's pretty much independent of states.